So again, the crux of becoming a cultural engager rather than responder depends on our view and pursuit of the good life. Are we placing those bricks on the house built on Jesus' teachings, or are we placing the bricks on the sand? Are we, saying we believe certain things mentally about who Jesus is, but actually living just like everybody else? Are the stories that we, can tell people about, are they actually ones we deep down believe in our hearts that are to be true about this world? And do our rituals match that? Do our rituals actually match that we believe that, what the whole church is built on, that one man died for the sins of all people, rose from the grave, and will one day come back to redeem all? Do we actually believe that to be true, and do our rituals reflect that? So we're going to talk about a little bit of, what is the secular vision of the good life? And again, this is things we've wrestled out throughout this class, but I want to kind of bring it to one kind of to a head, and then I want to talk about practically, where do we see this vision of the good life? Like, where do we actually compete for this vision of the good life? Where do we actually have to daily do battle? What areas practically in our lives do we see this come to a head? So, again, the secular, we discussed previously, the secular culture attempts to provide a picture of the good life centered around us. Dallas Willard talks about the core of the ruined soul. We've talked about this a lot in our spiritual formation class. The core of the ruined soul is somebody who elevates themselves over everything else. That is the core human problem. Think about Eve's original sin was an elevation of her desire above her desire to be obedient to what God had asked her to do. That is, the tension that we all wrestle with. And so our secular culture, is displaying or preaching a version of the good life that looks like, hey, you do what makes you happy. If it doesn't make you happy, don't do it. You do you. Be yourself. Be true to yourself. Don't let anyone define you. If something is trying to define you or trying to, place expectations on you, we'll get rid of it. Basically, pursue what makes you happy and cool. And actually, there's a guy I follow on Instagram. He's actually a really good running coach. I've taken a lot of tips from him. But he's a classic Instagram influencer, so he tries to post meta things about the world, and it just makes me laugh. And this is an actual post that he wrote out. He said, "One of the most important lessons I've learned in the last year is to do what makes you," and he put "you" in all caps, "happy. Don't ever change who you are for someone else. If you're unhappy with your situation, then leave. Life is way too short to waste time on things that don't genuinely make you happy. Invest in yourself and go pursue your passions. You won't regret it. I challenge you to ask yourself if you're doing what you genuinely love." And so you read that post and you're like, oh man, okay, sure, inspirational. A lot of our culture to read that. Actually, I read the comments. So many people were like, oh wow, awesome. Yeah, take charge. Wow, this has inspired me. Oh, go do what you love. Yes. The problem with that is a lot of things. First of all, this guy is in a relationship. At some point, he is going to have to change who he is to probably keep that relationship going. This whole thing is founded on an idea that don't change who you are for someone else. Well, anyone who here has been married for, a minute knows that that's probably going to be something that's going to happen. The other thing, if something's not making you happy or you don't love it, leave it. Good luck doing anything for any sustained amount of time, right? Again, there are some truths in this, hey, our life should be full of happiness. We shouldn't hate everything we're doing. Most people, they commit to me and they're like, I hate my job more than anything I've ever done in the entire world. I'd probably tell them, hey, you should reconsider a career change. But this idea, this notion that we should be pulled by what we love in certain moments, what makes us happy, that we need to stick to being true to who we are, and we shouldn't change for anyone else. That is a picture, a summation of what the good life is, and we know it is ultimately empty. That is a house built on sand that will collapse when hardship is met, when difficulty comes, when you enter into certain relationships, when you enter into certain situations. And we know, again, if we follow that as staff members at a church, I'd be hard pressed to find someone else on staff And I'm sure, all of you would say, I have the best job in the world. I genuinely believe I have the best job in the world. Like, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who enjoys what they do on a daily basis as much as I do. And even I have days where it's like, man, I don't really want to do this thing. Well, based off this, sweet. Well, I should leave, right? I'm unhappy. I'm unhappy for this season. I should leave. And again, that is a hollow vision of what the good life is, but that is what so many people are living their life based off of. And they're either actually living by it, and so they're breaking relationships, they're leaving jobs, they're, going from thing to thing, or that's what they want and they're not actually experiencing it, and so they're just discontent and like apathetic and fall somewhere in between. And so I want to provide that picture because, again, we know that there's a better way of living. The question is, are we actually taking that up on a day-to-day basis? And that view of the world infiltrates and can infiltrate every aspect of our day-to-day lives. Again, the reason why that's so harmful is because the elevation of what we want above all else ultimately leads to chaos, destruction, and death. If we choose what we want above all else, it will affect all of those around us. It's like, hey, do what makes you happy unless it, hurts someone else. Well, the question isn't unless, it's when it hurts somebody else, right? Eventually, like what we do, what we want is going to affect someone else. If you're in a relationship, if you want to actually have friendships, if you want to be a part of something meaningful, again, we do not exist in human vacuums or relational vacuums. What we do affects other people. And so if we continually elevate ourselves or we continually live by this secular worldview, it's why there's tension in our culture, is because what I want is different than what this person wants. And what I vision for the good life is different than what this person visions for their good life. And now they collide. Well, I'm right because it's what I want. You're wrong, and then they're thinking the same thing. And then now, where have we gotten ourselves? But again, if we're tethered to a stronger vision of the good life that actually calls us to submit ourselves to a king and to something else and actually lay down our expectations, ourself. And Dallas Willard says that is the first step towards a transformed soul, is actually submitting yourself to an authority. And the first step of salvation is submitting yourself to an authority, repenting and submitting yourself to this alternative kingdom, this alternative way of doing things. If we are willing to do that, well, that actually opens us up to this doorway of possibilities of experiencing a kind of life where we give of ourselves, where we actually have a greater meaning beyond just what makes us happy. We have something that can withstand difficulty and ultimately have something that can attract others. I was with my friend, one of my best friends from college. He was my roommate for 2 years. He's a missionary in Sweden. He is one of the coolest people I've ever met in my life. And he was in town for cultural, I think it was like Global Focus Week at Liberty. And we were, sitting down talking and hanging out. And so again, he's a missionary in Sweden. And what he regularly does is interact with refugees and college students in Sweden. And basically, if you were to take, whatever, like the synopsis of post-Christian culture and the Western world, like the front lines of that is Sweden. Sweden is kind of the front lines of all the stereotypical things that you think about post-Christian Western world. Like that is literally Sweden to itself. Individual, he joked around with me all the time, and COVID required people social distance. People in Sweden were like, sweet, like I don't want to talk to anyone anyways. And he's like, no one talks to each other. Like post-Christian, like do what you want, do what makes you happy. Like it is the pinnacle of that. But so you would think that the gospel is probably the least wanted, story in that place. But he is time and time, he's telling me this, amazed by how compelled people are by the story of the gospel, because deep down inside, they're miserable. Like the story of them telling themselves isn't working. Whether it's refugees who have had to flee their countries because of religious persecution or just government breakdown, who have no hope for their lives, the gospel gives them hope, or secular college students who are pursuing their own ventures, their own vein, their own interests, and are slowly seeing their own view of the world begin to break down. And he gets to kind of meet both people and kind of where they're at, and he has seen a number of people, literally like he's telling me these crazy stories, people coming to faith because they actually see that there's a better story. And I was just convicted of, man, I forget all the time that we actually have the best way to live. We have the answers. We have the story, the most compelling story that's ever existed. And we have access to it, and we get to live by it. And so it's so easy to see what's going on outside of us and think like, man, like, I know this is the best way to live, but like, what's going on outside of us just looks so much more fun. They look happier. They look more excited. It just looks like life's easier. I know this is what I'm supposed to do, so I guess I'll keep doing it. And my job's tied to it, so I should probably just keep doing the things that I know I'm supposed to do. But like, you know what? Deep down inside, I don't actually know. I don't actually know this is better. And I was just convicted of like, that's not true. Like, I interact with, he interacts with people on a daily basis, and he's like, oh, I think I'm struggling. He was like, they're struggling to the max. And basically I say all that, we can easily look at the world and culture going around us, and we don't realize that it's actually, like, people are struggling, and they're looking for something greater. And we actually get to display that something greater to them through the way we live our lives. And that's through the pursuit of the good life. And not just in the theory of the good life and be able to have the right answers to the question, but in the nitty-gritty, practical, everyday parts of our life.